We have a fantastic lineup of industry expert speakers. From this session, internationally renowned speaker, Professor Lisa Short, talking about cryptocurrencies, to sessions on forensics, cyber psychology, diversity in the cyberspace, and zero trust. So listen, stay tuned and enjoy the next 6 hours. There's loads of content. We've got 12 industry speakers, a panel discussion, and plenty of time for Q&A at the end of the sessions. Please participate as well. You know, we'd like the sessions to be as interactive as possible. So if you can add your questions for the speakers to the chat, we look to address as many of those as we can in each of the sessions. And then finally, just a big thank you to all who have contributed to this day happening. You know, events like these would not be possible without the support of the tech member companies along the Atlantic Gateway of Ireland and our volunteer itag Cyber Forum. So enough about the Cyber Forum. Let's talk a little bit about the speaker. And on the line here, we have Andrea Manning, who is CEO and founder of CyberPi. She's a GDPR and cybersecurity speaker and a pivotal member of the itag's Digital Women's Forum and the itag Cyber Forum. And she's going to introduce our speaker, Professor Lisa Short, who's a global thought leader and influencer. And she's going to talk to us today about cryptocurrency, digital assets, and their positive impact for transparency. So, Andrea, over to you.
Thanks, Eamon, and good morning, everybody. You're all very welcome. So our first speaker today is Professor Lisa Short. She is a preeminent innovator with just vast international experience, including designing several patents, as well as founding and managing multiple cross-jurisdictional companies with cutting-edge digital technology for trust and value chain improvement projects across different segments and global markets. Challenging the state of play and disrupting the norm while pragmatically embracing the opportunities of the rapidly advancing potential of frontier technology like blockchain, AI, and the Internet of Things means that Lisa's at the forefront of pioneering effective positive change, digital trust and transformation. Her career is augmented by multiple board appointments, and she's a highly respected international academic, risk and research contribution, which is why she's just known as one of the top 150 B2B women thought leaders in the world to follow in 2021. And she's one of the world's top 50 thought leaders and influencers on blockchain, edtech, and cryptocurrency. Lisa also shares regularly her passion for advocacy, for gender parity and women in tech, where she's presented at the United Nations. COVID saw Lisa locked in Australia for 18 months, but she's back home in Wales now. And Lisa, it's my absolute privilege and pleasure to welcome you to Ireland, albeit virtually, and to introduce you to the Irish tech community to talk about cryptocurrency, digital assets, and their positive impact for transparency. So please use the chat function and leave any questions for Lisa at the end. And over to you, Lisa.
Thank you very much, Andrea. I know that sounds like quite a mouthful, really, but I really do appreciate being here. I'm quite honoured, actually, because I actually have a very close cousin that's also in Ireland, so I can't wait to physically get there as well. But at the moment, I am in Wales, in Cardiff, having been stuck in Australia for the last nearly 18 to 20 months. So I am back. Now, I'm going to share my screen, so just give me a moment to share screen. And just while I'm doing that, because I can pretty much most times do two things at the one time, is I just want to acknowledge that this week has been Ada Lovelace Day, which was on Tuesday. So I also want to acknowledge the amazing work of women in STEM as well. So in this time, so just give me 2 seconds to view this on the screen. Always, I'm just going to move the technology never quite works when you want it to. There we go. So thanks, everyone. One of the things I am known for is, I guess, I do like to leave a positive image around technology, particularly around the conversations of digital assets and cryptocurrency. And actually, I deliberately changed the title. Sorry about that, Andrew. I did it at the last minute. That I actually changed it to digital assets first and cryptocurrency second. The reason I did that was that cryptocurrency is only one of the digital assets, and it falls in under the very broad umbrella of digital assets and the space that we work in, and of course the foundational technologies of blockchain that sit in underneath that. But what I do want to talk about is the positive impact for transparency and what that means for the economy, and of course, along the way, to try and bust some of the myths and misinformation that occurs as a result of them. A little bit just about one of the organisations that I have founded. It is called the Heus Collective. Interesting, there's always a deep meaning behind most of the things that I do. Heus was actually the son of Zeus. He was a Greek god, and he was the god for innovation and technology. And so that is the very reason that we've taken that. And his anvil and iron fist, and the iron that he used to work with, is the strength of this industry. And I think that's a really important point, and the reason I actually show this particular slide. But I work with 3 other world preeminent authorities in this space around advancing ecosystems of this technology. And I think that's important because we have to understand that foundational technologies such as blockchain, and of course the solutions that run on them, such as digital assets and cryptocurrencies, don't work on their own. They don't work in silos. They work alongside other organisations, other technologies. They certainly work with the security industry, but they also are hybrid to our traditional institutions and organisations that we work with on a daily basis. So they don't run on their own. They don't run separately. We all have to work together, and I don't think that's happening sufficiently enough. So I open with this slide because I think this slide is important, and this leads in often to the conversation that we have around the security industry, digital trust, digital currencies, cryptocurrencies, and a lot of the misinformation that falls into that category, which is often quite negative. So broadly, society has a right to be safe and to due legal process. And we look to the institutions that govern us, our elected decision makers, the fundamental organisations such as the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the United Nations, all of those world state authorities. We look to them to keep us safe and to manifestly look after our enshrined legal right. But I do ask the question, and I often will in these presentations leave you with more questions necessarily than answers, because that's actually the idea of it, so that it actually keeps you being curious, is are we keeping pace with the trust and transparency that as society we expect? And certainly in the last 18 months, I think that has been challenged. So if you think about it, legal systems aren't built upon a single code of conduct. They've actually evolved over thousands of years to reflect changes in our society, our culture, our values, what we think, how we behave, and of course, technologies that have supported that. But many of our laws that we still currently use remain in our statute books. And one that I do want to just touch on is, which is quite interesting actually, is, and bearing in mind that Ireland and Wales come from very ancient cultures, they're Gaelic, very ancient cultures. So I think representing and respecting the history and what we take from that and bring it into the current time is important. So some of these laws underpin our enshrined right as businesses and as individuals and as an economy to our legal process, our right for a legal process, and also for trust. Now, Clause 29 of the Magna Carta from 1215, and is still cited by High Court judges today. So it's as relevant in 2015 as it is in 2021. And so I think that's important, because there are bridges that we need to build from history to where we are when we are talking digital currencies and digital assets. But at the same time, technology is also advancing so rapidly that changes that once took centuries are now happening in years, and in fact months. So put it into perspective, and I often show this slide just to put this into perspective. In the last 18 months, every 6 months in that 18 months has been 7 years of digital change. That's the speed with which we are moving forward, and we have escalated. And of course, the good things and the bad things and the positives and the negatives out of the global pandemic, one of them has been the escalation in digital transformation. We are doing things now that we would not have anticipated probably in 10 years' time. So this is important just to look at this slide to say, basically we've gone in 2,000 years from being a hunting society to the beginning of the 20th century when all of us in 1999 changed over to the year 2000, and we did think the whole world was going to come to an end when we got to the noughties, and it didn't. We woke up on the 1st of January 2000 and everything worked and we were all still alive and we didn't fall off the edge of the planet. That's 2,000 years to get us to what we would call the fourth industrial revolution. And just prior to that was the third industrial revolution in the late 1990s, where we got the computer and the internet. Now, bear in mind, I quite proudly am not a digital native. So I can remember the very first day that my children, when they were in high school in the 1990s, got their first computer, and I sat there looking at this fantastic computer that I bought them with a little green dash blipping at me thinking, this is fantastic, now what do I do? Now that's a very short period of time. And that's just a bit over about 25, 26 years for me. In fact, my youngest daughter wasn't even born then. So I'm not a digital native. 2,000 years to get to that point and the amazement of the computer and the internet, and 21 years to go from there to the fourth industrial revolution. And now we've gone past that, by the way. So when people say we're in the fourth industrial revolution, we aren't. We're past it. We're now in society 5. But what's important about this is that the technologies have changed. So foundational to the third industrial revolution in this sort of transition period was the internet and the World Wide Web. Where we are now and the fourth industrial revolution, there are 3 foundational technologies, and I actually clump these together and call them blockchains. So when people talk to me and I use the word blockchain, I do not differentiate between AI, Internet of Things, and blockchain, because AI and Internet of Things are the outcome of the data that can run on a blockchain. So they all mix together. But that's a very small period of change. And I think that's important in terms of when we're looking at what's our expectancy around trust and due diligence and what's occurred in that period of time. There is a fundamental difference between the fourth industrial revolution and when we first got the internet and computers, where we were able to simply transfer information. Where we are now in society 5 is we have the ability and the capacities to transfer value. And we also have the ability to fundamentally understand what we value. Before it was information. So if you think back in the late 1990s and the year 2000, when we first started to get access to the internet, it was the first time we were able to digitally transfer information. Now we can actually use technologies such as the internet, blockchain, IoT, AI, machine learning to transfer value, the things that we value more than information. And one of those is trust. So information, and it's why I say that you cannot differentiate between, if you say blockchain doesn't do anything on its own. And most people go, well, that's a pretty bland statement. It doesn't. Blockchain requires data. It requires transactions. It requires something to be built on it. It doesn't do anything unless there are transactions or data feeding it. So information underpins trust and the law. The information we receive, the information we use, it underpins how much we trust business, people, and also how, of course, we use the law and how, of course, we apply the law. Most of you would probably never have heard of this thing, but there is actually a measurement of trust, and it's actually called the Edelman Trust Barometer. What is quite extraordinary is that the last real challenge to global trust was in 2008 when we had the global financial crisis, and that was the very reason that Bitcoin and, of course, blockchain technologies that it is built on was founded. It wasn't built or founded because of crime or criminal conduct or illicit behaviour or the wanting or the need to go underground. It was built as a result of the global financial crisis and our challenge, our absolutely fundamental challenge in trust. We have now had our second biggest fundamental change and challenge in the trust barometer. And this is a quote directly from the most recent report from the Edelman Trust Barometer. And I think it is really quite extraordinary. The barometer reveals an epidemic of misinformation, widespread mistrust of societal institutions and leaders around the world. Adding to this is a failing trust ecosystem. It's completely unable to confront the rampant, what we call infodemic, that's leaving the four big institutional groups: business, government, NGOs, and the media informationally bankrupt. And that's statistically come out of the measurements that we've had. So we right now as business and a society, and of course our elected decision makers, have a mandate to rebuild trust and chart a new pathway forward. But I very interestingly like this diagram too, because the foundation of that is blockchain. It is the technology as foundational as the internet and the web and the World Wide Web that will enable transfer of value, enable us to asset valorize. And when I say asset, it's the reason I changed the title to digital assets, because people do not understand that a digital asset could also be my reputation. It can be my business reputation. It can be a cryptocurrency. It can be a manifest representation of a physical asset, such as a non-fungible asset or a non-fungible token. But it does give us the ability to assure information, and it does give us transparency in trust. And I'm going to go through a couple of the features of blockchain in a minute for those who are not familiar. But let's just go back and look at how this might perceptually fit into what I would call the underpinning foundation of security. I also am very careful in that I don't like to call it the security industry, because as far as I'm aware, and as far as I believe, security and digital health and health of our digital world is as foundational as the internet, the World Wide Web, and blockchain. It is not an industry, it's a foundation. It's a way and a culture that we need to adopt. So 20 years ago, if you think about it, crime was mostly low tech. The internet was a fad. It was going to go away. It was never going to last. And it was just starting to impact people, business, and the economy. Social media was only starting to connect people, and physical boundaries bordered our transparency, the law, and decision making. So there was far more physical boundaries than there were digital boundaries. What's changed? In 20 years, or just on 21 years, we now have the economy, transactions, and decision making is certainly high speed and high tech. And I put in brackets, and so is crime. And I put it in brackets because I want to make sure that that's not the reason. It is some of the outcome, but there are positives to this as well. So there's the positive first, and then there's the outcome that's occurred. The internet is the cornerstone of opportunity. But it's also an opportunity for unwitting criminality. The World Wide Web, it's virtually, we've gifted a digital platform to our entire world, a free digital platform, the same as the internet, to everyone that has reach. And there's somewhere around about 76% of the world now are connected to the internet. Not everyone, but about 76%, and higher, of course, in the developing nations. There's still a lot of work to be done in the emerging nations. But as well as that, it's also given us a platform for illicit and malicious business. It wasn't designed for that purpose, but that's one of the outcomes of it. Social media has connected us, but it's also given global reach to the unethical and the criminal. Now, bear in mind, and let's go back to this, and I'm going to talk about the Facebook outage last week. We are all very quick to criticise the big unicorns in our social media and our digital platforms, such as, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, all of those. We're always very quick to criticise. But I'm going to ask you this question, and you need to seriously answer it to yourself. Could you imagine the last 18 months to 2 years without them? Because I couldn't. I would have been completely isolated. I wouldn't even know any of you. So I think it's always really important to remember the positives. I also want to remind you that last week when Facebook was out for 6 hours, the world realised what it was like not to have Facebook, which, bear in mind, it doesn't cost you to use. It is a choice to use it. We've chosen to use it because of the benefits that it delivers. Yes, it's not perfect. I'm not saying that it is. But can I tell you, for every hour that platform was down, the economy lost $219 million US. That's the impact that these technologies are having. Data is the most valuable asset on the planet. Not Bitcoin, data. And Bitcoin operates on data. But most importantly, that data can also conflict with our privacy and our ethics. And so there are some challenges, of course, that as the security foundation that we are entrusted as professionals to deliver, that we need to consider. What's changed really is pervasiveness of the digital world. And yes, it is a digital revolution, and it's strongly positive. It does bring challenges, risks, and opportunities, but the digital environment is like a fog. It does have the potential to dull transparency if we can't find our way and our pathway through it and manage it in a different way. And digital currencies and cryptocurrencies often fit into this fog. They seem to be pervasive and everywhere, and they are growing very fast, but we have to find our way through this fog in a hybridized way, working with traditional institutions, working with some of those laws that we currently existingly have, because they actually don't need to be changed. And we need to find our way through this path, this fog, in a path that's ethical, trusted, and produces a digitally trusted pervasiveness. Because bear in mind that this digital environment is literally like the air we breathe. There's no borders. It is completely borderless. It enables us, it allows us to work, it listens to us, it watches us, it examines our habits, it records our knowledge, it influences our thoughts, it knows almost everything that we do. In fact, I was in an Uber yesterday, and the fellow said, you know, we were laughing about some of the misinformation about vaccines and so forth, and he said, we've already all had a chip embedded in us. And I'm looking at him thinking, okay, what's he going to say? And he straight away said, the smartphone. And he's right. I could not survive a day without my smartphone. So I think it's important for us to look at the space that we're in, the pervasiveness of it, and our choices to navigate a path that is informed and digitally trusted. And certainly digital currencies and digital assets falls into this space. Excuse me. A saying by Maria Gabriel, who is one of the European commissioners, in today's economy, there is less and less time to build trust in the way it happened in the past, to fight cancer, to balance renewable energies, to trace the authenticity of goods. Actors have to be able to trust one another without meeting face to face. And how can we achieve this? And that's, of course, with blockchain. So what's the absolute positive impact and enabler from this technology? It's the first time we've ever had a foundational technology. We have a new form of digital currency and digital assets that is peer-to-peer. We don't need institutions in between. We have, from that, artificial intelligence through the use of machine learning and the connectedness of the Internet of Things that is fueled by data. And currently, remember, that data is garbage in, garbage out. I'm not saying that that data is all good, but together, this foundation technology has the ability to create connected ecosystems of trust and financial inclusion. Now, we all hear a lot about nation states in technology, and certainly around cyber. I've created a new one. It's called the Trustless state. That's the state of digital health and digital resilience that blockchain offers through the use of its technology and the solutions such as digital currencies and cryptocurrencies that run on top of that. And we need to be able to understand what they genuinely are and can do, and of course, how we can connect the physical and the digital worlds of the global economy to that. So blockchain assures our transparency. And again, I'm going to ask another question. We have to remain, as an economy, agile and adaptive to build that new state, not the nation state, not fight the nation state actors, but to build a trustless state. And I say, is it and are we? Now, my two questions. Are we adopting change and understanding the technologies that are foundational as fast as what we need to be able to deliver on the outcomes that it provides, such as an assurance of trust, and understand, of course, the potentials of these technologies. I say we're not aligned. Now, I know that less than 3% of those people who are making decisions about the economy for me, in other words, our politicians, our board level executives, those who are in charge of the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, all the big state institutions, have only 3% of them have even knowledge of STEM, let alone a quarter of that 3% have any knowledge at all of blockchain. And yet I go back to the fact that this is foundational technology of the society that we're living in. I also know that this is this comes straight out of the United Nations report on innovation. This is just a brief table on the adoption and adaptation of frontier technologies and our nation's readiness to adopt these technologies. What's really interesting is that the States, Switzerland, and the UK, and you'll see Ireland comes in at the top 10, which is fantastic at number 8, they all purport to be ready to adopt this technology. But what doesn't align is the other 5 columns, because of the top 10 countries, Ireland is the only one that comes in with ranking up there in terms of adoption. We are not, none of them over here. You don't see the USA, you don't see the UK, and you're not seeing Ireland up there with putting as much money as they require into R&D. It would make no surprise to tell you that China doesn't make it to the first top 10 in terms of adoption readiness, but it does make it to the top 1 in the world in the R&D that it's putting into, the research and development funds that it's putting into that space. So for us to be aligned, we need to be contributing, and we did talk just before we started this about skills, we need to be putting as much money into research and development, skills development, belief in industry ranking, and certainly contribution of investment funds to the same degree of adoption readiness that we say that we have when these are foundational technologies. That will tell you we've got decision makers, and also that R&D and skills and capacity do not align yet for a foundational technology, and we are in 21 years into the 4th industrial revolution and moved past it, and yet we don't have the skills to adopt to it. Most importantly, if people can't understand, they can't participate. But what's worse is if people who lead our nations and set and enforce the rules, including our industry, they can't make good decisions. And so education in this space is without a doubt so paramount and so important and so key. Blockchain are the building blocks of trust. They give us assured data and assured value. Now, I'm doing that, just move on to just a couple of features to say why I say that. 4 main areas of blockchain. First of all, it's decentralized. So in other words, there is no one person making the decision. It's thousands of nodes of computer work and operational work across the globe and across blockchains making decisions. Not one person and not an intermediary organization. So there are no intermediaries. There's no middlemen in this conversation. There are decisions being made that are being made by thousands or millions of nodes on a decentralized ledger. So it's a bit like the old-fashioned book we used to have where every page was numbered, but now every page is numbered is a node on a big digital ledger. The only difference is you can't remove one. You can't tear a page out and you can't change it. And that's one of the most absolutely, and I use this word a lot, profound things about this technology. The other part is a thing called a consensus mechanism. Now, a consensus mechanism means that every piece of data or block of data that goes onto a blockchain, and I do understand, I'm not going to get too complicated, there are many forms of blockchain. There are public and private and permissioned and not permissioned, which simply means there are some blockchains that are gated, only available to a few, others that are public and free, a bit like MOOCs and all of those sorts of things. But in essence, they have the same characteristics, just the lock and key mechanism to get into them is slightly different. But the consensus mechanism means that for every piece of data, whether it be a cryptocurrency transaction or not, or whether it be a transaction of other form of value, or whether it be a transaction of data or a movement of data, it doesn't matter. To add another block to that blockchain, greater than 51% of all the nodes, all the individual computers using or accessing or working on that blockchain have to agree. Now that's important because that's a fundamental philosophical part of blockchain. We can also use that consensus mechanism. This is where one of the patents is that I've been working on over the last 18 months. We can change that 51% consensus mechanism to be 75%. And for those of us who work in corporate law, we know that most decisions that are made that require all shareholders or greater than 75% of corporate decisions and shareholders, we can make that consensus mechanism 75%. We can use decentralized blockchain technology to make corporate decision-making, and we can make it autonomous. We can also use it in the law because we can change that 71% consensus mechanism, it's just a gauge, and we can make it 99 or 100%. So in other words, to add or assure data and its authenticity before it can get added to a blockchain, we can use that decentralized mechanism and experts and authorities on those blockchains to gauge what we put on that blockchain and add to it. The next or the third part, which is so important, it's immutable. Now, the word immutable means it can't be changed. It can never be removed. So the question always comes up around GDPR. But GDPR refers to personalised information. So that means you need to have very serious conversations and work with people who understand the technologies of what it can and it can't do and what you can put there and what you can't put there around personalised information. You couldn't, for example, put personalised information on a public blockchain. It can never be GDPR compliant in its ordinary form. But because it comes down to the features of immutability. But in terms of digital trust and digital assets and cryptocurrencies, that should automatically tell you that every transaction of a cryptocurrency and a digital asset is immutable. It never, ever can be removed. It is always transparent. There is always an evidentiary trail. Always. There are no exceptions to the rule. So when you hear people say that cryptocurrencies and digital assets and digital currencies have been produced for criminality and for money laundering, that could not physically be further from the truth, because for every currency transaction, there is a transparent, visible pathway. Even blockchains such as Monero, which was a private blockchain, permissioned blockchain, has transparency in transaction, and we are able to see those transparency in transactions. Yes, we do have a pseudonym. In other words, we don't have Lisa Short has made this transaction from point A to point B. Lisa Short becomes a cryptographic name, but that name is connected back to me via my AML and KYC. So it is fundamentally flawed to say that digital assets and cryptocurrencies are not transparent and have an evidentiary trail. The fourth feature that I want to talk about are the lock and key security mechanisms that allow us to enter and exit the blockchain and the cryptocurrency and digital asset space. Now, again, it comes down to understanding that there are different forms of blockchain around private and public or permissioned private blockchains, where, again, a bit like my house, if you like, it's a private permissioned blockchain. I decide who comes in and who leaves and who goes and who enters. A public blockchain is like going to a public shopping centre or a big city where anybody can come and go. But there are rules and regulations for what I do when I'm there. So if you like, a public blockchain has the same features that I've engaged here, but there's not as many rules on who can access and enter it and provide transactions across it. So we call it opening and closing a blockchain as opposed to a private one. So the lock and key mechanisms, and these are important, create a trustless environment. So one of the very important conversations that needs to be had as we are moving into this pervasive digital space, and we are not, is around digital identity. And when I go digital identity, I don't mean a government-held identity. I mean a self-sovereign digital identity, which is me. My self-sovereign digital identity has the opportunity to be turned into what I would call a non-fungible asset or a non-fungible token, which is simply a representation of my uniqueness and singularity. And every single person on this planet has uniqueness and singularity. And so, although you might hear a lot of people talking about NFTs being the next big flavor of the month when it comes to digital assets and digital currencies, they're talking about it in terms of high value art and other things. What they're not talking about is what they actually are. A non-fungible token, or I prefer a non-fungible asset, is simply a representation digitally of uniqueness and singularity. And it is not, in fact, the asset. It actually points to the asset and connects to the asset. So it would be my CV and my career. I create a non-fungible asset or token, which is a piece of digital code that represents who I am. I anchor that non-fungible token immutably to a blockchain. It becomes a digital asset and a digital currency because I can actually trade my digital identity. I can borrow against it. I can use it as an asset, but there is no one else governing my career and my ownership of my self-sovereign digital ID. It is without outside control. And so this is important. So if you talk about Bitcoin, for example, there is no such thing as Bitcoin Limited. There is no such company as Bitcoin Limited. Everyone who owns a piece of Bitcoin owns the blockchain. No one controls it. The technology drives the blockchain. Okay. There are companies that sit behind some of the solutions that operate on blockchain, and there are now companies that own infrastructure which have built blockchain, but the blockchains themselves and the solutions that run on them, they are fundamentally without control. They run themselves because of the features of blockchain. And that is one of the scariest things about digital currencies and digital assets that has most of our decision makers running scared. It's not because they are bad, it's because they don't understand it and they fear what they don't understand. So are we in the wrong race? And again, I do like to leave you with some questions. Are we in a race to control and regulate technology, e.g. digital assets and digital currencies and cryptocurrencies, or people? What should we be trying to manifest the change? Are we missing opportunity by fear and not understanding our potential? And I'm going to give an example of crypto derivatives, which in the UK were banned in 2020. So crypto derivatives is a simple way of making money by determining or buying cryptocurrencies or determining you're going to buy a cryptocurrency at a certain price on a certain date. The government decided that it was far easier to ban something than educate people on how to use them, which is fundamentally flawed. So do we need to reframe the conversation that blockchain is disruptive innovation? It is not regulatory evasive. And how do we use it as an enabler of regulation? So we need to reframe the conversation, not ban it. And we need to be educating. So some facts and fiction. Cryptocurrency, digital assets, and non-fungible assets do not facilitate fraud and crime. People do. Data, it's not harmful. How we use it, maybe. Machine learning and AI, it's not intelligent. We are. It doesn't create itself, we do. Internet of Things, it doesn't connect crime. People do. And digital technology, it does not redefine right and wrong. We do it. So are we grappling with the ethics of technology, or are we grappling with the people using it and their lack of knowledge of it? and what we do. So some basic facts. Cannot dispute. Blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies that use it are creating, this is from the World Economic Forum, by the way, are creating open, democratic financial systems. But unfortunately, many people remain skeptical due to widely circulated myths and misconceptions. Our cryptocurrency market is growing at 11.2% per month. It's here to stay. It's 10% of the global economy. Bitcoin has grown and I've just picked one, by the way. There are actually more there are some that have grown greater than Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is one of the best known digital currencies. Bitcoin has grown 66,000% since 2009. So if you had $1 of Bitcoin, and I use dollars, I know we can use pounds and euros, but I just use dollars. In 2009, you'd have $1.98 million in your bank account sitting on a Bitcoin blockchain. If you, however, had one Bitcoin in 2020, you'd have $5 in 2021. And I like to bring it back to those who are socioeconomically disadvantaged and those who are on fixed incomes. The difference between having $1 and $5 may be the difference between being able to afford food or not, pay for a bill or not, get an education or not. It is fundamentally profound because it is financial inclusion, because many of those people that might have that dollar are those who are not financially included. The facts also are that in 2020, the highest fine in history for anti-money laundering failures were via the Westpac Bank, which actually happens to be an Australian bank, and it was a $1.3 billion fine, highest fine in history. And the other thing that's profound, and this is a statement directly out of one of my books, there is only one single civil fine of a Russian exchange in 2017. And since 2015, there has not been any AML fines for cryptocurrency since 2015. Now, that is not what you hear in the media and the social media channels and the traducers coming out of the IMF and a few of the others who are scared of this technology. Our current situation is not working. So if we look at our security world that we have a outside in, and I use this description, if you like, of a chocolate. We've got a soft core. Currently, our approach is a soft core. We see that data, everything else that's in there, our ability to control crime, all of those things, to have a secure, healthy, resilient, safety workplace and digital trust is soft. We keep putting layers on the outside to make it more resistant. But if you crack one of those layers, so just like you might bite on a soft chocolate, it'll ooze out. Our failures ooze out. What we need to do, and I am mindful of time, so I'm just going to step over to this one, is we need to harden the core by understanding what digital currencies and digital assets and the value of blockchain can do. So identity, if you go back to those principles of blockchain, our identity is a digital asset. It is immutable if we can create it and we can anchor it to a private permission blockchain. Each of us can have a private blockchain where our identity sits and we can allow people to access and use it and not even move that data. It stays in place in situ. We have data that is immutable. In other words, once data has been added to a blockchain and we've assured its entry point, we can say that our data is there forever. We can valorize assets. We have evidentiary trails. We have evidentiary access to those trails. And it's really important to bear in mind that
60% of products that
colonial, whoever's got their
free finance available with no deposit.
please.
Easy. That's easy. That's Easy Living Furniture, Brady Road, Castle Barneo.
Can somebody just mute their mic?
Furniture.ie. Better than reduced in the
I'll just talk over it. It's really important to think about the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack from earlier this year. in the first 3 weeks post that attack, 80% of the Bitcoin that was used for that ransomware had been recovered by the evidentiary trail of cryptocurrencies. And since then, the very vast majority, nearly 97% of all of that ransomware has been recovered. And so that is not a known thing about digital currencies, and it's not a publicised thing. There is no such thing as crypto fraud. There is no such thing as crypto jacking. There's no such thing as any of those terminologies that we use. It is just outright fraud and crime. It is just a means of payment that does have for us an evidentiary trail, and it is an immutable asset that we have, which is fantastic. Blockchain, I'll finish on this, got one more slide. The French Minister of the Economy, Bruno Le Maire, said at the OECD forum last year, all I know is that most people talking about blockchain, and he went on to talk about digital currencies as well, know nothing about blockchain. And there is not a truer word that's been spoken. Industry needs to start to engage with people like myself and others, such as Dean Armstrong that I work with, who genuinely know and understand the facts about this technology. It does the heavy lifting for the foundations of our industry to keep us digitally safe and resilient. It is not what people assume it is to be. I thank you for your time. I'm certainly going to take some questions. I will leave you with a picture here of one of the books that I contributed to during and helped orchestrate in the last year. What's important about it, and the reason I say this, it's called Blockchain Impact, and often people ask me about resources to read. It's a fantastic resource because in this is 17 of the world's leading CEOs who've used and implemented blockchain for systemic change in their business to fundamentally assure their records and their data, and of course use financial transactions using cryptocurrencies and digital assets, one, to give greater financial inclusion, for greater efficiency gains, for greater security gains, for greater resilience in digital pervasiveness. There's some great stories in there, so for people that do want a resource, it's a fantastic resource. So again, I thank you for your time, and certainly I've got, I think, a few minutes to answer some questions. Thanks, everyone.
Lisa, thank you. I think we could keep you for the rest of the day, and I had a wonderful summing up, and I am not going to squeeze any of that time off because we've got so many questions come in. Are you happy for me to share your LinkedIn and Twitter details?
Absolutely.
I know
absolutely.
Everybody wants to find out more, everything, so I'm going to pop those in the chat. One of the questions that's come in here is, cyber insecurity is on the increase in sub-Saharan Africa, and the effect may fester around the world if we don't nip it. What are the efforts being made towards confronting this challenge?
Oh, look, Africa is a really interesting space, and you'll see that one of the companies that I've got here is Africa Agritech. So I'm doing a lot of work in the African space. Something that's really interesting is that the highest growth of digital wallets outside the highest growth in digital wallets is in Nigeria, Africa. And one of those reasons for that, the second highest growth, by the way, is in the 18 to 25-year-old group out of Australia. Now, which is, to me, even was quite profound. But there is a reason for that. Now, the reason for that is that Nigeria alone sits there's a trust register. Out of 180 countries that sit on that trust register, Nigeria sits at 144 out of 180. Out of institutional trust. What you are starting to see now is some of the institutions trying to ban cryptocurrencies and digital assets and use and purport to say that cybersecurity and breaches of cyber are coming from those regions. There may be that some of the criminal actors are. What's also happening at the same time is the rise in digital trust through the uses of blockchain technologies. It's getting harder and harder for some of these communities to actually use these digital currencies and access to assured digital platforms, but there are ways, because remember, it's peer-to-peer. So what's really profound is we see it in the industry as almost like a last-ditch effort for those who are scared of criminality, because bear in mind what I did say to you is that these technologies are fully transparent. So corruption can't occur on a blockchain. The only way we can stop the blockchain and cryptocurrencies is to stop the fiat or cash on-ramp onto it. And of course, that's the pathway a lot of our institutional players are using at the moment. Again, I'm going to say education is going to be key to this. And 17% of the planet live in Africa. It's a big economy, and it's a massive economy in this space. It's a space to be watched. Cardano, Solana, and Algorand, 3 huge big blockchains, are doing a lot of work in that space in micropayments and payments to increase trust in that space. So I would prefer to see that it's growing in digital trust than growing in cyber risk.
Lisa, thank you. So I'm going to share the rest of the questions with you, and maybe you can answer them over Twitter or on LinkedIn. Absolutely. Or whatever. But I can tell you right now, you have an open invitation to come to Ireland so we can meet you in real life.
Thank you, everyone.